Hi, Sheldon.
Hi, Lee.
How are you?
I'm okay, thank you, sir.
Good, good. We're recording the session, are we?
Yes, we are. Just in case there were things in there that I didn't make a note of. I'm happy not to record, just aid in kind of my, just in case you give me actions or there's kind of like things that you go through that I didn't kind of follow.
Yeah, that's
No,
fine.
but I say I'm happy not to record. It's not an issue at all. It's just that kind of I'm mindful that sometimes kind of like you mention things and I don't actually kind of record it properly,
Yeah,
and then
that's okay.
you remind me of I said this, I said that. Oh yeah, that
Okay,
that that was it. It wasn't kind of like it wasn't anything else. Yeah.
no problem.
Okay.
Right, what do we
Right.
want to look at
Right.
first?
Okay. So in two things then. Yeah, a quick one. Amanda mentioned to me earlier this week that you would ask her whether she'd forwarded on to me the planning guidelines and risk and issues guidelines. She mentioned that to me on Monday. So um, I wasn't sure whether there was anything that I needed to pick up with her on that. So
No, so no, so I don't know why she said that. So all I asked her was, that I can't find the document now, but there was something that she had developed with Michael, like you say, planning and standards
yeah,
guidance document that
yeah,
I circulated with you and Jackie to say, "Look, I think we should use this kind of as a template for the
yeah,
internal PMO stuff." Then I developed the templates from it.
yeah.
I went back to say, is this now in a position to hand over to the PMO to put into the PMO library, as it were? And she said
Right.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm in the middle of, just before I dialed into this, I'm just setting up an email to Keith
Mm.
to say, I think we need to do a PMO library and start to kind of organize some of this stuff on the Y drive. So her material would just fall into that category. So that's all I kind of contacted her about.
Okay, which is fine, yeah, because we had a meeting just now and it was a case of, okay, it didn't last long because I thought there was something that I needed to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, that's fine. You
I don't know if
mentioned,
you,
sorry.
I can't find that email that I sent to you and Jackie with the link to the documents. It's not important. I just couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't know what I'd
Oh,
done with it, so
okay.
I'll try
Um,
and dig it
uh,
out.
okay, I'll have a look, and if I can find that, and if I can delete it, then I'll send that through to you. Not a problem at all.
Okay.
So secondly, second minor point, you mentioned about you couldn't find the documents on SAO 6 on the shared drive. Um,
Oh, when I looked
yeah,
yesterday, yeah,
yeah. When I
yeah,
kind of like when I looked to put the when I looked yesterday to upload all the documents, I went to
yeah.
the SAO 6 folder and there wasn't anything in there. And there's another folder and there's SAO 6 within that, and that's where Jackie's got all her documents. So therefore, that's where I placed all mine as well.
It's in PMO design and structure. There's a SAO 2 and SAO 6.
Okay. What I will do, Lee, after the
I
meetings.
can see it now. It's there.
All
It was
right.
uploaded yesterday.
That's correct,
Yeah,
Lee.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's in the PMO.
Yeah.
The SAO one is literally the statement of work, but yeah, it's in. That's fine. It's there now, so that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So in terms of the planning process or the next process that I'm kind of working on now, as I mentioned to you yesterday, on Keith's Kanban, he's got two separate post-it notes, one for planning and standards and one for dependency management, and that seems to kind of like reflect what we had in the service catalog. Now, you mentioned that, and you have mentioned this previously. To be fair, but you're looking at what combining the two together, and what would that look like as such? Because in my mind, in terms of developing I'm looking at a process for developing the plan. So it's basically instructing the project manager in terms of, okay, what he needs the plan to look like, and then it will go to the PMO to review, and then it will become baselined. and then you've got kind of like a tracking schedule where kind of like every month, okay, the project manager needs to do certain things. But that's not what you had in mind, is it?
Um, I'm just conscious we've got little under 6 weeks
Yeah.
to do something in this space. So if you are confident that, given the co-production ethic that I know you've talked about with at the team meeting this week with Keith, and be able to develop something, I would suggest rapidly, probably by the end of next week, with co-production ready to go through that kind of PMO steering group and all the stuff. Then if you're confident that can be achieved, then you do what you feel is defined within that scope. I don't think it's achievable, which is why I'm saying I think we need to look at one or two ways in terms of planning. If we're looking at, because again, you've got the planning at a project level, you've got planning at a program level, and then you've got planning at a portfolio level. And the process will need to articulate what a project manager or delivery manager need to do. Again, we haven't got the agile question nailed, so we don't know what we're going to be doing in that space around planning, because they're not using the templates as part of the reporting currently, and we don't have a methodology that dictates how agile should be done within the organization. Then if we're focusing explicitly on the waterfall piece, then it's the interaction between the project and how do you then not just say this is how you baseline and this is what you do in terms of tracking a project in a project plan, but then how do you amalgamate that into a program plan without having an enterprise Microsoft project solution? So that's where my concern is that planning standards and tooling, I would struggle to even to document that within 6 weeks, let alone get it through an approval process into then implementation.
Okay. Right. I know that. Okay. Thanks for that. I know that you were talking about planning and dependencies merged together. In your mind, how does that work, or what does that look like? I know it's a separate question, but I know that originally you were looking at planning and dependency management, and how would that look?
I don't quite follow what you mean in terms of what does the dependency piece need to cover in terms of scope, or because dependency management is just it's a subset of planning, isn't it? So planning, if you look at planning as the umbrella term,
yeah,
scheduling, estimating, a project plan, which isn't a schedule, it's a document that outlines how that project is going to be delivered. Dependencies are a constituent part then of planning, as is contingency mitigation. In terms of critical path, you've got Slack, and so planning covers a wide range of topics.
Okay, yeah.
So that's where my nervousness sits. Is if you said you were going to deliver a planning standard process, I would expect all of that to be incorporated, personally, because we haven't defined what that means. That's why I thought we have a clear need to look at baselining, and I think I developed it from the statement of work, from kind of planning standards into dependency management, because I don't think that was in the statement of work. So I think what I was looking, I can't see the document at the moment. That perhaps if you sent me the stuff that Amanda did, is that right? Let me just get that. When did you send that to me? Yesterday? Yeah. So the planning, CQC planning standards and guidance and standards. This is the document that Amanda and Michael put together.
That's correct. Yeah, I've got it in front of me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so this is looking at. So have you developed this on further?
No, no, I haven't. It basically just kind of like looks at Microsoft Project and kind of how to use the tool to create your plan. That's kind of like really kind of like what this document tells people.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's
yeah,
fine. So PMO planning guidance and standards, right? So this is the so in the content, it's got progress replanning and rebaselining a plan after an approved change request.
yeah.
So it's already got stuff like that in there, is it? Looks like it has.
Yeah, this it doesn't really say. I'm just looking at it now. Yeah.
It says
Right.
when a change request has been approved, this will invariably result in a change to the baseline schedule. When this happens, the affected task and the plan need to be rebaselined. So
Yeah. So that's yeah. So okay. So and it just says okay. This is how you use the tool to rebaseline. So that's really kind of like um, and in the change control process, okay, what I've mentioned is that particularly with waterfall, if your change has been approved, then you need to update your project documents, including your plan, and you follow the planning process, or you follow the planning process, which I suppose links in with this. So that's in terms of the hand holding or the handshake, that is established. Okay, in order to update your project plan, you'll come to this, and this is what you'll do in lesson 7.
yeah,
Yeah, but okay,
and
but you still need to update your risk and issues register. There's other project documentation that a project manager will need to update, not just rebaselining the plan. There's other stuff that they'll need to do.
yeah. But if we're just looking at this document now in
Yeah.
terms of planning guidance and standards, so this is the execution of how to do it, um, rather than the process which outlines when they should do it. So for rebaselining, that's fine because it says after a change request. So your change request process can just refer to this lesson 7 then in this document in terms of instructions as to how to rebaseline a plan after an approved change, I
Mm.
presume.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. So and likewise then in terms of the risk one, I think
I'll need
just
to look. I'll need to look at that
yeah,
document to see where the lesson is.
yes, indeed,
Yeah.
and then reflect that in your change
Yeah.
process.
But even in terms of the business case, though, if we look at it at that sort of level, there's a number of documents, there's a number of things that a project manager will need to do in order to reflect a change. So you've got your plan that they'll need to do, which is basically lesson 7. They've got their risk and issues register that they'll need to either close off items or look at items there. So I'll need to look at that document. There's the business case, I suppose. I don't know whether we're saying that. Certainly, if you're working in a Prince environment, you will be updating your business case. But I don't know whether we're saying that we need to do that within CQC. But that's a question that we'll probably need to ask. In terms
Well,
of
I'm conscious we're perhaps going off
yeah,
course
yeah,
a little bit now. We're
yeah,
talking
we
about
are.
change control again. So,
Yes,
but
yeah, we are. Yeah,
but
we are.
but you've got so Matt Masters, sorry, Matt Matlock is looking at business cases. So just link in with him
Yeah.
and understand. I think from your document from change control, you just need to reference the fact that So as you said, in terms of the process steps, is once the change control is approved, then in whichever scenario, consider reviewing and updating the following. So, as you said, plan, look at this document, risks, look at the equivalent document, business cases, look at the business case template and guidance, and then just link up with Matt, talking about what we covering off in the review meeting this morning is make sure then that this change control process is tied into the business case process and each has a reference to acknowledge the existence of the other so
Okay.
that it just brings it together. But I think just listing it out in that respect is fine from what you're doing. You don't need to go into that much detail and to say and what you need to do in the business case is X, Y, and Z. The business case process and guidance should tell them what to do there. Perhaps just as having an indicative comment somewhere in the document that says a bit like this one does. So if you have a change control, you need to review the business case, or the business case needs to be reviewed in your document, as part of the impact assessment. So we just need to make reference to what needs to be done within each individual process.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, good. Okay, we're on board with that. I'm happy with that, and I understand that, Lee. Right. Okay. So going back to the planning standards, I do feel that I will be devoting a lot of my time next week, well, even today, looking at change control. And that's kind of because we're looking at a steering group meeting in a couple of weeks' time. We've basically got not we, I basically got kind of like this week or next week rather, to get this document completed, which is fine. Okay, I have produced. I did knock up a kind of like very high level develop project schedule plan on Visio. Do you want me to send that to you to have a look at for information, or just leave that until we have more information about what planning standards actually means?
Well, so what does the Visio do? Sorry, in terms of how to.
On Visio, I've used Visio and I've created a flowchart for developing a project schedule. Because I was using in my mind in terms of Amanda's document, which is about using MSP to develop your plan. What we kind of haven't got there is the steps or the involvement of the PMO, and also in terms of the sponsor or even the program manager approving the plan that is produced.
Okay.
Or am I going totally off piece? Because in my mind, the project manager can produce their plan, but who reviews it and who approves it?
Yeah, but so you're talking about a project schedule rather than a project plan.
Okay, project schedule. I'll just use that term. Project schedule. Yeah.
So if I think this is where it just needs to be defined in terms of what does planning standards cover.
Yeah.
Because the planning guidance standards here covers the use of basically a schedule. So if you wanted to put a wraparound process then that outlines what you just said in terms of what the process document will dictate, as in when to do a plan, who to approve it, all that kind of stuff. I think we just need to check that thinking with Keith perhaps on Wednesday, given that you said you're going to be busy doing the change control stuff anyway. I think we just check that thinking on Wednesday, because is that going to give anyone any value? It would be my question.
Okay.
In terms of, because if they understand what they need to do, so I think that's just the first question we need to, perhaps as part of your update on Wednesday, we can clarify to say, even if you have got just like perhaps a high level list of things that document could contain, which I think is a fine bit of thinking to do. I think do that thinking in terms of the questions you just said. Is it important that we understand when to do it, who approves it, and what it should contain? I guess the expectation, like I said, would be that when I look at this document here, it says this is how you enter a task or a milestone. I think the plan, the schedule needs, if we're going to do a process document, we almost have to then, given the challenges we talked about on the call this morning around, when is a risk.
Yeah.
it's kind of, you're going to have to be very explicit about what, work breakdown structures, and it starts to make me feel very uncomfortable.
Okay, okay,
If we
yeah,
if we're
yeah.
given that we got 6 weeks to do it, given what are we, are we going to be able to do that? And that to me is that we haven't got a methodology. It's a huge you know activity that could swallow, and we get nowhere near it. I think it's far more perhaps appropriate to say we've got a planning guidance and standards document. So it tells people how to use Microsoft Project to develop a schedule.
Yeah.
If we are going to put some context around that in terms of when to do it, when who approves it, uh, it's just then how the natural conclusion I will draw from that is it's going to tell me how to plan, and I don't know if that's within your
Okay.
thinking. Is that document that you're talking about, would that include guidance on how to plan?
Not in terms of PERT charts and all those sort of things, no.
Okay, so I think I
Yeah.
think you could do some, I think spend a bit of time in terms of when you say planning standards, and like I said, I've always been very explicit around planning standards, but as a subset, dependency management, I think it's more, given that dependencies are what, I guess, we've got the planning reporting and the templates now
Mm.
have the capability to capture dependencies, but we don't have any guidance around dependencies. Really, I think the handbook mentions it, but doesn't go into any detail around what is a dependency and how to identify incoming and outgoing. I think is a far more smaller subset that we could probably put into a process document in the same way that we've got change control. I think then there is a need to do a planning standards bit around work breakdown structures, but I don't think we're in a position to do that currently. So I think there's a rebaselining bit in here, which, I think the way you may want to think about it is whatever's in here in terms of guidance material in using the tool, do we feel there is a need to provide some softer text around when to use this and when to apply it, and who approves it, etc. And then augment this document and the process document then to cover off dependencies, and look at it as a kind of incremental piece that we're building on this document, and then a process document that supports when to use it. And then also, so step one, do that. And step two then is augment this document and the process document to include dependency management. I think is a more achievable, goal in this scope of work.
Okay. And also, because this document that Amanda created references the use of creating your schedule using Microsoft Project, I can't remember whether within Microsoft Project it shows you how to manage dependencies as well. And therefore, does my document on dependencies need to say, okay, then you need to go into Microsoft Project, and these are the fields that you need to actually use to do dependency management. So it's kind of how do you use the tool to do, the question is, do I need to produce one of these guidelines documents to say this is how you do dependency management using the tool?
So a dependency in Microsoft Project is a milestone, isn't it?
I can't remember kind of whether
Yeah,
whether there's a function or features that kind of like Microsoft talks about in terms of, okay, this is kind of like how you do dependencies and that sort of stuff. Whether it is kind of like it's just linking milestones or whether it's wider than that, I don't know. I can't remember.
but again, given where the organization is, I think
Mm.
that I've always used milestones as dependencies. I think, I think that's, um, you can set up Microsoft Project to do a million and one things, but I think for where they are at the moment, and I think the guidance documentation under the milestone entry, I'm pretty sure when I talk through with Michael, talks about using milestones to identify dependencies.
Okay.
at, at certain levels. So I think like there's a flag or something that it identifies like level one or something that it's that milestone is a dependency. So there is some coding within the existing guidance. So I think we just develop it from that.
Right.
So don't not worry about how Microsoft Project deals with dependencies, but there's guidance material tells the attachment that you sent tells people how to identify a milestone as a dependency. But the question I think the process needs to answer is what is a dependency? And how do I identify dependencies and how do I record dependencies would be then considered within this document.
Right. And would you expect as a template a dependency management template or spreadsheet where the project manager will kind of like say, okay, then these are my kind of like dependencies. These are kind of my, in terms of like host and beneficiary dependencies, would we expect the project manager to populate this template, or would it be or would it be the PMO that will be populating that template with
It would so
information?
it would yeah. So I think there's two elements to that. So I think the PMO would look to develop from the project templates, Microsoft project templates that have been submitted as part of the reporting schedule, because the guidance gives it people indication as to when to record a dependency. I think the PMO have a role then in terms of amalgamating that data to create some kind of dependency matrix or map.
Mm.
Would be my view. Like I said, this is just my view as to how I run PMOs. But then it's down to the individual project as to whether they use a dependency. I think we have to sanction or we have to get them to use the existing reporting premise to report dependencies up. So I wouldn't necessarily be suggesting that they then bypass that route and do a log, but it may be useful for them to have a log so that they can understand their dependencies greater and then report the necessary ones up through the reporting cycle. So I think there's probably a place for each element, but what we actually mandate is just the reporting cycle, but then there is a log potentially available for them to use to record their dependencies and understand the dependencies. And as a project management tool, given where we are in the organization, I've always done that in Microsoft Project, but I don't think the organization's at that stage yet where they can do that. So a log may be more appropriate for the project to use and the program in the same way we've indicated change control can be managed. And equally then, they report it up through the reporting cycle, and then the PMO have an opportunity then to amalgamate that data to provide a portfolio dependency map for the organization. It's just my kind of high level thoughts off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay, that's useful, Lee. Okay, thanks for that.
So I think just have a think about what planning standards is and isn't. Like I said, the plan that I've developed, that I know obviously we've circulated and reviewed a couple of times. I've been very explicit in that, saying planning standards is probably too aspirational at this stage. But certainly, we can look at developing incrementally the existing processes that we've got in reporting, which already talks about dependencies. Let's provide some wraparound guidance as to what is a dependency, when to acknowledge it, how do you manage a dependency, all that kind of stuff may be more useful and then, with the artifacts I've just described then around dependency map and logs, perhaps that could be part of that process. That would be my view, because I think that can be, again, something that can be pulled together relatively quickly and just kind of providing some very basic high level guidance over how that's managed at a project, program and portfolio level.
Okay. Again, I fully concur, and more importantly, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand the kind of like what you're saying. So okay, I'm happy with that as well.
Okay, well,
Okay,
give it
brilliant.
some thought. Yeah, I was just going to say, give it some thought in terms of structuring that conversation for the team meeting next week, and then as we go around, let's I think when we look at the backlog and the Kanban board, let's have the discussion. Say, look, we're planning standards. I think what we need to do is say that our our the word I'm looking for. Our expectation was that planning standards is such a broad church, it was never going to be feasible to do planning standards in this scope of activity. So what we've anticipated was that we can build on the reporting work that exists around the template in MSP, which identifies how to record dependencies. We feel is perhaps more beneficial alongside change control and some of the other processes that we talk about dependency management as a as a kind of standalone element as part of the wider planning standards, but acknowledge that future work around work breakdown structures and project plans in the traditional sense of a document as to how you're going to deliver that project really needs to form part of the methodology piece.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay then. Okay, so it's after 12. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at. Yeah, okay, that's not a problem at all then, Lee. This has been really, really useful.
Yeah, well, like I said, anytime you want to talk through something, like I said, I've always got an opinion on something. It's not necessarily the one we should go with, but it's always useful to talk about this stuff. I had a similar conversation with Jackie yesterday about something, and perhaps the direction we can go in. But I think we just need to be really, same advice I've given everyone, but and I always try to be as well, is let's have a view in terms of what we think is achievable. Let's look at time boxing that activity. So say next week with the discussion of the team meeting, just say, look, within 2 weeks we can pull together a process flow, a bit like I did with continuous improvement stuff.
Yeah.
So let's pull together a process flow and a form or a template or whatever it is we think, and then let's look at that and say, right, that's is that workable, and do people agree that that's feasible? And if it is, then let's agree that. Then let's look at bringing in other people then to develop the process document and build that up. And again, taking the stuff that we talked about before, it doesn't have to be that the danger is, or the natural inclination is that we want to try and cover all the bases, and then the document becomes quite heavy. But it needs to be, we need to be able to kind of understand, I guess, communicate the narrative to the people that are going to be using it. And it goes back to what we talked again at the team meeting this morning. We went to great pains to get the PMO handbook stuff published and through a review cycle and done, and people aren't using it, and that can resolve some of the queries they may be having in terms of the data they're submitting. So we need to be, we can only do so much, but there's going to have to be a need or a desire from the user population to actually read some of the stuff and understand it, and then reach out and contact us if they need some more additional support. So I think we can, with the dependency piece, we can look to say, right, we've got 6 weeks, let's time box the development piece to 2 weeks, co-production to 2 weeks, and then submit for approval of PMO steering, and that just kind of work in that systematic way.
Okay.
But yeah, anytime you need, give us a call, set something up. It's no problem with me.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. Good. Okay.
All right. I'll speak to you at 2 now, because I think we got this resource stuff. You're dialing into that?
That's correct. Yes. I think Jackie's just sent a change, hasn't she? A change. I think it was going to take place at 1, so I think it's now at 2. Yeah.
I think that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. All right. I'll speak to you later. Thanks, Sheldon.
Bye, Lee.